Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Adults ESL Online Learning. I'm Dr. Hernandez Smith. In this video, we will read the introductory training on the Proficiency Level Descriptors, PLDs, for grades 2 through 12 for the TELPAS Texas English Language Proficiency Assessment System 2023-2024. And this comes from the Texas Education Agency Student Assessment Division. This presentation is intended to be used after the Making of the ALPS TELPAS Connection Grades K-12 Overview, which may be accessed from TEA's TELPAS resource page. To make best use of this PowerPoint module, print the ALPS TELPAS Proficiency Level Descriptors, PLDs, found on the TELPAS resource webpage. These PowerPoint resources, plus the TEA publication, TELPAS Educator Guide, are provided to support the effective use of the ALPS during instruction and assessment. Note that abbreviated, reformatted, or modified proficiency level descriptors must not be used in training raters or assessing students. In support of standardization, the PLDs must be used as they have been formatted and published for TELPAS. For the purpose of this training, the term emergent bilingual student will be used. However, there has been no change to the ALPS PLDs. Proficiency level descriptors, PLDs. The PLDs are the rubrics teachers use to determine students' English language proficiency for ongoing formative assessment and the spring TELPAS administration. Originally developed for TELPAS, the PLDs were incorporated into the Texas English Language Proficiency Standards, ALPS, in the 2007-2008 school year to reinforce their use in instruction. For TELPAS in grades 2 through 12, a student will be assessed with online tests unless the student meets eligibility for a special administration of an online test. A special administration includes a holistic administration in listening, speaking, and or writing, and a paper test, regular print, large print, or braille for the reading domain. Refer to the district and campus resources for additional information on a special administration of an online test. The TELPAS holistically rated assessments were developed by TEA in collaboration with test development contractors, bilingual ESL consultants, and a focus group of teachers, bilingual ESL coordinators, test coordinators, and university professors. The design of the assessments derives from the following language acquisition research and research-based standards, models, and assessments. Second language acquisition research of Jim Cummins concerning the development of BICS and CALC. TESOL, teachers of English to speakers of other languages, ESL standards. ACTFL, American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages. Proficiency guidelines and the ACTFL performance guidelines for K-12 learners used in Texas LOTE languages other than English programs. Similar assessment strategies used in other states. 6 sets of PLDs: listening, grades K-12, speaking, grades K-12, reading, grades K-1, grades 2 through 12, and writing, grades K-1, grades 2 through 12. In alignment with the ALPS, TELPAS evaluates English language acquisition as it relates to grade level expectations for understanding and using English to meaningfully engage in content area instruction. The sets of PLDs are often referred to as rubrics for purposes of TELPAS. There is one K-12 rubric for listening and one K-12 rubric for speaking. K-1 raters consider a student's listening and speaking proficiency levels in relation to the typical listening and speaking abilities of native English speakers. For grades 2 through 12, teachers use the listening and speaking PLDs in instruction, but not for TELPAS. Because TELPAS has an online test with a variety of item types for these grades. For reading and writing, there are separate rubrics for K-1. The K-1 rubrics are distinct because factors associated with emergent literacy distinguish K-1 learners from students in higher grades. For grades 2 through 12, teachers use the reading and writing PLDs in instruction, but not for TELPAS, because TELPAS has an online test with a variety of item types to assess these grades and language domains. As a reminder, a student in grades 2 through 12 will be holistically rated in listening, speaking, and/or writing only if the student is eligible for a special holistic administration. Emergent bilingual students receiving special education services should be evaluated relative to their ability to understand and use English to assess the general curriculum at their enrolled grade in accordance with their individualized educational program. This assessment guideline aligns with federal requirements for ensuring that students with disabilities have access to the general curriculum. For EB students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, please refer to the TEA's TELPAS Alternate Resources webpage for more information. Key features of each proficiency level: beginning, little or no English ability; intermediate, limited ability, simple language structures, high frequency vocabulary, routine contexts; advanced, grade appropriate with second language acquisition support; advanced high, grade appropriate with minimal second language acquisition support. This slide summarizes key features of the PLDs in terms of how well EB students can understand and/or use English in social and academic settings at each of these 4 levels. These key features are emphasized in the PLD summary statements for each language domain. As an example, refer to the summary statements in the top of the PLDs for listening. Note the term second language acquisition support. This term refers to the language assistance EB students need as they learn English. It is different from the type of assistance that any student, whether an EB student or not, might need when learning academic content. Second language acquisition support is specific to the unique language assistance that EB students need. The overall language abilities of each proficiency level are as follows. Beginning students have little or no ability to understand, use English. They may know a little English, but not enough to function meaningfully in social and academic settings. Interactions. Intermediate students do have some ability to understand and use English. They can function in social and academic settings as long as tasks require them to understand and use simple language structures and high-frequency vocabulary within routine contexts. Advanced students are able to engage in grade-appropriate academic instruction in English, although ongoing second language acquisition support is needed to help them understand and use grade-appropriate language. These students function beyond the level of simple, routinely used English. Advanced high students have attained the command of English that enables them, with minimal second language acquisition support, to engage in regular all English academic instruction at their grade level. Note that high academic achievement is not a prerequisite of the advanced high level of English language proficiency. Advanced high EB students exhibit a range of academic achievement just as their native English speaking peers do. TELPAS proficiency level descriptors, grades K through 12 listening. The PLDs for each language domain present a set of major attributes associated with each level. The descriptors do not constitute an exhaustive list, but are sufficient for identifying students' stages of English language proficiency. Together, the summary statement and bulleted descriptors for each proficiency level form a student profile. Review the full-size listening PLDs and note the overall English communication abilities described in the summary statement for each level. B. Beginning, little or no English. I. Intermediate, simple, high-frequency, routine. A. Advanced, grade appropriate with second language acquisition support. AH. Advanced high, grade appropriate with minimal second language acquisition support. Examine the main features of each level. Note how the descriptors further define the summary statements and show the continuum of English language development across the proficiency levels. First descriptor, type of spoken English understood and extent to which understanding is dependent on supports and linguistic adaptations. Second descriptor, degree of comprehension demonstrated when interactions are not modified to include supports and linguistic adaptations. Third descriptor, degree of need to seek clarification to understand or confirm meaning of spoken English. In the context of second language acquisition, the term high-frequency words refers to commonly encountered words. Who knows very little English can be made to understand through context, gestures, and pictures. Initially, the kinds of high-frequency words and phrases typically acquired may include, for example, greetings, numbers, objects in the classroom and around school, names of classmates, etc. When rating a student, read each proficiency level as a whole, the whole vertical column as opposed to isolated descriptors, and determine the level that best describes the student's current overall level of English language acquisition. Reflect on how well the student understands the English he or she hears during activities such as reacting to oral presentations, responding to text read aloud, following directions, cooperative group work, informal interactions with peers, large group and small group instructional interactions, one-on-one interviews, individual student conferences. This list of activities is not exhaustive. Teachers may identify other appropriate activities suited to the grade levels taught. Think about what behaviors can indicate an EB student's level of English language listening proficiency and how to tell whether an emergent bilingual student is struggling to understand the English used in oral presentations, directions, text read aloud, etc. For grades 2 through 12, teachers use the listening PLDs for instructional purposes, but not for TELPAS. The domain of listening is assessed online. However, there is a 2 through 12 holistic assessment for listening if a student meets eligibility for a special administration of an online TELPAS listening and speaking test. Beginning listener non-academic listening sample. What might a beginning listener understand? This sample shows classroom speech that is not academic in nature. In each listening sample presented in the upcoming slides, it should be assumed that the teacher is talking informally to a class without making linguistic accommodations designed for EB students. In spontaneous informal speech, EB students who have learned a little English may hear some individual high-frequency words that they will be able to distinguish in highly routine classroom situations. Today, buses, school, go. However, they cannot understand enough English to make sense of spoken messages delivered to a normal speed and without linguistic accommodations. This sample exemplifies what is meant by the second beginning bullet of the PLDs for listening. Beginning listeners struggle to identify and distinguish individual words and phrases during social and instructional interactions that have not been intentionally modified for EB students. These listening samples reinforce the importance of making appropriate linguistic accommodations according to the EB student's proficiency level. Beginners can be expected to struggle to understand what they hear even when extensive linguistic accommodations, adaptations, and supports are provided. Beginners benefit most from having a teacher or peer translate what is said into their native language. While this beginning student understands some very high-frequency words and phrases in English, the student is not able to make sense of the message the teacher is conveying to the class. An intermediate listener is able to understand much more of the message than a student at the beginning level. Typically, students at this level are able to understand enough keywords and phrases to capture the general meaning or general idea, gist, of the message. This sample exemplifies what is meant by the second intermediate bullet of the PLDs for listening. Intermediate listeners often identify and distinguish keywords and phrases necessary to understand the general meaning, gist, during social and basic instructional interactions that have not been intentionally modified for EB students. In this sample, the student is able to understand a number of phrases containing simple, high-frequency words. These phrases, next week, put this in your backpack, take home tonight, are used very routinely in classroom settings, supporting the EB student's ability to make meaning of longer segments of speech. This student understood the basic gist of the message, but few of the important details. Intermediate listeners often require extensive linguistic accommodations to understand more than just the general idea of what they hear in class. As indicated in the PLDs, some listening accommodations include visuals, simplified language, gestures, pre-teaching to preview or build topic-related vocabulary, slower speech, and other verbal cues such as repetition and native language support. This sample exemplifies what is meant by the second advanced bullet of the PLDs for listening. Advanced listeners understand most main points, most important details, and some implicit information during social and basic instructional interactions that have not been intentionally modified for EB students. Advanced listeners are usually able to understand the main points and most of the details of this type of speech, even when the message is not linguistically simplified. As shown here, there are still some gaps in understanding unusual constructions of the words and words used in unfamiliar ways. This student is able to understand the main point of the message and most of the important details, such as the consequence of not bringing from the form back, not understood by the intermediate listener. The student doesn't understand, however, how long the field trip will take and the idea of parents volunteering to go along to help out. Linguistic accommodations help a student at this level fill in these types of gaps. This sample exemplifies what is meant by the second advanced TIE bullet on the PLDs for listening. Advanced TIE listeners understand main points, important details, and implicit information at a level nearly comparable to native English-speaking peers during social and instructional interactions. Advanced TIE listeners are usually able to understand most words and details in routine spoken messages, even when the messages are not linguistically simplified. This advanced TIE student understands that the class will leave after the announcements and be gone the entire day, and the student understands that the permission slip must be brought back signed. The student does not understand what chaperone means and therefore doesn't understand what the parents will be able to volunteer for. It is important to keep in mind that students at the advanced high level have difficulty understanding certain things they hear, particularly when low frequency words are used. At the advanced high stage, though, students understand enough of what they hear to need only minimal second language acquisition support to engage meaningfully in academic and social interactions. These next slides show an example of speech that is academic in nature. As with the previous slides, it should be assumed that the teacher is talking to a class without making linguistic accommodations designed for EB students. These slides provide additional examples of what is meant by the second bullet of each of the PLDs for listening. This sample shows speech that a student might hear in a math classroom. In teaching students, teachers frequently give certain repeated, highly routine instructions. Open your books to page, for example. Beginning listeners hear such instructions regularly and begin to memorize phrases, even without understanding each of the individual words. Beginning level students also acquire some academic vocabulary that they hear daily in highly predictable contexts. As shown in this example, the student understands some high-frequency academic words. 1, 2, rectangle, circles. The understanding of such words in spoken messages is affected by how fast the person is speaking and the emphasis given to the words. In the example above, a beginning level student accustomed to using a textbook in math class may memorize the phrase, "Open your books to page." But the student is likely still struggling to learn English words for numbers. When the teacher says page 172 at normal speed, the student may hear or understand only part of the number and therefore not turn to the correct page in the book. An intermediate listener understands more of the routine instructions heard daily in the classroom. Today we are going to study top of the page, today's lesson, and make sense of longer segments of speech. While students at this level are usually able to get the general meaning, gist of routine, non-academically complex interactions, they struggle to understand academic lessons that have not been linguistically modified. This intermediate level student hears and understands familiar content area words such as cylinder, rectangles, and circles. However, the teacher is attempting to teach students about the net of a cylinder. Because this lesson has not been linguistically modified, the student does not understand enough of what the teacher is saying to grasp the idea that the lesson is about a new concept called net. Note also that even students at the intermediate level struggle to understand strings of numbers, 172, spoken at normal speed. Advanced level listeners have acquired enough English to understand the English used in discussing familiar academic topics and some unfamiliar topics. This helps them gain more meaning when they learn new academic concepts. However, advanced level listeners need ongoing linguistic support to 1. Ensure that they are understanding correctly, and 2. To add new vocabulary words, net, two-dimensional model, to their receptive vocabulary. Because of the teacher's lesson, it is not linguistically accommodated through the use of gestures and verbal cues. This advanced level student still misses important information. The student gets to the right page and sees the definition of the word net, but can't distinguish the word in the teacher's speech as the teacher continues talking about it. The student also does not understand dimensional model, which is key to understanding the understanding of net. The level of linguistic understanding of the advanced high listener is similar, with minimal second language acquisition support, to the linguistic understanding of native English speaking peers. This student is able to understand almost all of what the teacher said in the introduction to this lesson. The student does not understand the expression undivided attention, but still understands the point of the sentence. The student doesn't understand the word net in one of the sentences because the teacher says it too quickly. However, the student still captures enough to get an overall understanding of this part of the lesson. TELPAS Proficiency Level Descriptors grades K through 12 speaking. Review the speaking PLDs and note the overall English communication abilities described in the summary statement for each level. Examine the main features of each level and note how the descriptors further define the summary statements and show the continuum of English language development across the proficiency levels. The focus of each descriptor is shown below. First descriptor, discourse, type, and length, fluency. Second descriptor, vocabulary. Third descriptor, grammar structures. Fourth descriptor, accuracy. Fifth descriptor, pronunciation. Beginning versus intermediate. Be careful not to conclude that beginners use only single words and phrases to communicate, and that students who occasionally produce sentences have reached the intermediate level. Before reaching the intermediate level, beginners will speak in sentences at times, but the sentences will be based primarily on recently practiced, memorized, or highly familiar formulaic material. Students reach the intermediate level when sentence length speech is no longer primarily based on recently practiced, memorized, or highly familiar formulaic material. Students at the intermediate level can use their growing bank of English vocabulary and emerging awareness of basic grammar features to recombine learned elements and create with the language in order to speak simply in routine academic social contexts. Students near border between levels. For all language domains, remember to read each proficiency level as a whole to determine the proficiency level at which the student performs most consistently. Remember that students peak into the next level before performing most consistently at the new level. Likewise, students who have recently reached a new level may occasionally spike down to the level below and not perform entirely consistently at the new level. For students near the border between two levels, determine the level at which the student performs most consistently overall. To do this, step back and read both proficiency levels from top to bottom, making sure to go back and review the summary statement for each level. Reflect on how well the student speaks English during activities such as cooperative group work, oral presentations, informal interactions with peers, large group and small group instructional interactions, one-on-one interviews, classroom discussions, articulation of problem-solving strategies, individual student conferences. This list of activities is not exhaustive. Teachers may identify other appropriate activities suited to the grade levels taught. Think about activities that provide good indications of students' speaking proficiency levels and the differences between observed when EB students with different proficiency levels speak during cooperative group work, classroom discussions, oral presentations, etc. For grades 2 through 12, teachers use the speaking PLDs for instructional purposes, but not for TELPAS. The domain of speaking is assessed online. However, there is a 2 through 12 holistic assessment for speaking. If a student meets eligibility for a special administration of an online TELPAS listening and speaking test. The following 14 slides present speaking samples. At each proficiency level, the speech of a single student is presented. Each student responds to several speaking tasks that require the use of everyday spoken language as well as academic language. The speaking samples are not rendered to show pronunciation features. It should be assumed that everything printed was understood by the transcriber. The ellipses indicate think, pauses, and hesitations. In the case of the beginning student, the ellipses may also indicate spots where speech was unintelligible. These samples are intended to help provide a basic understanding of the speaking PLDs and profile for each level. Remember that when teachers rate the speaking proficiency of their own students, they will have observed the students in a variety of speaking situations, not just on isolated speech samples. Identify features from the PLDs that you see represented in the samples. Beginning features represented in the 4 beginning slides. Mainly speaks using single words and short phrases. High frequency, concrete vocabulary. Keywords and key expressions for basic communication in academic and social contexts. Lack of ability to connect ideas and speak in sentences. Some sentences and words based on recent practice, memorized, or highly familiar material. Frequent inaccuracies and communication breakdown when trying to convey information beyond linguistic level. Overall, little or no functional ability to speak English in academic and social settings. Example 2. Beginning speaker. While students at the beginning level may have some ability to express themselves in English, they rely on a highly limited bank of vocabulary and only speak in sentences using memorized, highly familiar language. Most of the time, they are limited to using isolated words and phrases to convey meaning. These features are demonstrated in each speech sample of this beginning student, who is in the later stages of this level. Some examples of highly familiar, high-need, memorized language. My name is. I am a student. I am in the grade. I am years old. How are you? What is your name? I need a pencil. I need a paper. I need an eraser. I need a ruler. I need a book. I speak Spanish. I speak Vietnamese. I have a brother. I have a sister. I have a pet. I have a game. I have a car. My favorite color is blue. My favorite subject is math. My favorite music is happy. My favorite TV show is. My favorite teacher is. My favorite sport is. I like to eat. I like to read. I like to play. I like sports. I study. I like to study. I like my teacher. I like school. I like sister. I like my sister. I like my friend. I like my dog. I am from. I live in. Example 3. This beginning student uses some recently learned content vocabulary, earthquakes, energy, and associated vocabulary encountered in the lesson. Shake, earth, die, fire. But the communication breaks down when trying to speak in a connected way about the lesson. Beginning speaker example 4. Similar to the previous example, this student uses some recently learned and highly familiar vocabulary, but experiences a communication breakdown when trying to talk about today's lesson on Christopher Columbus. Intermediate speaker. Intermediate features represented in the 4 intermediate slides. General ability to speak in sentences. Mostly short, simple sentences. Basic vocabulary needed in everyday interactions. Emerging awareness of basic grammar features. Ability to recombine learned words and phrases to create simple, original messages. Speak best in present tense. Overall, ability to speak in a simple manner using commonly heard English. Second language acquisition inaccuracies increase when the student tries to use complex or less familiar English. Now later, my mom, her, other baby, 7 months, the name is, and play of running in the house. Intermediate speaker, example 2. Speaking sample on this slide. Although telling about where he used to live requires past tense, the student uses the present tense. Primarily language feature. This is what I make do every day. May not be understood by people unaccustomed to Spanish speaking emergent bilingual students. Intermediate speaker, example 3. Primary language and second language acquisition features are frequent. Hat up on the hair. Jacket of square black and white. The man looks the duck what is swimming. Intermediate speaker, example 4. This speaking task requires the ability to explain the rock cycle, which requires the use of more complex language structures and specific, less familiar academic vocabulary. The student is able to speak using some of the academic vocabulary he has been learning. However, the student pauses frequently and has more difficulty communicating than in the previous slides due to the increased language demands. Limited English vocabulary and language structures greatly affect the student's ability to connect ideas and explain this complex process. Overall communication is hindered. Advanced speaker, grade 2. Advanced features represented in the 3 advanced slides. Able to describe in some detail using basic English grammar structures. Able to narrate in basic present tense, past, and future tenses in some detail. Have vocabulary to speak comfortably and fluidly on familiar everyday topics. Overall ability to speak using grade appropriate English with second language acquisition support. The student has grammar structures necessary to make comparisons. My tooth fell, but hers didn't. I don't collect stickers, but she does. We both like to play a lot. The student makes minor second language acquisition errors that don't interfere with communication. My tooth fell. I have worn bracelets. Advanced speaker, example 2. The student is able to speak comfortably about a past event on a familiar topic. as compared to the intermediate level, vocabulary is progressing from the general basic to more specific descriptive: mud, slippery, trampoline, slipping. The student shows an emerging ability to use complex and longer sentences. Errors occur when attempting to describe using less familiar language. Drop me on the mud lacks clarity. Advanced speaker, example 3. The student uses content-based language to talk about a familiar academic lesson. This sample includes less detail than the previous two, and the student shows less comfort due to the academic and linguistic demands. Advanced high speaker, able to communicate, able to participate in extended discussions on a variety of social and grade appropriate academic topics. Communicate effectively using abstract and content-based vocabulary. Use many of the same idioms and colloquialisms as native English-speaking peers. Use complex grammar structures and complex sentences to narrate and describe. Minor second language linguistic errors. Overall ability to speak using grade appropriate English with minimal second language acquisition support. This student is able to effectively communicate what he understood about dinosaurs in class using appropriate content-based vocabulary: female, male, hatch, humans, skeletons. The student is able to use long and complex sentences smoothly in explaining academic material. Minor errors in grammar and tenses do not interfere with overall communication. Example 2, advanced high speaker. The student elaborates with ease about a common school-related experience having difficulty and taking reading tests. The student uses idioms and colloquialisms. I don't get it. I scored low on. I'm getting high scores. Characteristic of native English speakers. Peers. Advanced high speaker, example 3. The student is able to comfortably and fluidly express and explain his views about whether certain rules are fair. Unnatural phrasing and linguistic errors. Shirts tucked out. Jump squads. Much tallies are minor and don't interfere with communication. TELPAS Proficiency Level Descriptors, grades 2 through 12 writing. Review the grades 2 through 12 writing PLDs and note the overall English proficiency described in each summary statement. Beginning, intermediate, advanced high. Beginning lack vocabulary and grasp of language structures to address grade appropriate writing tasks. Intermediate, enough vocabulary and grasp of language structures to address language appropriate writing tasks in a limited way. Advanced, enough vocabulary and command of language structures to address grade appropriate writing tasks, but need second language acquisition support. Advanced high, vocabulary acquisition and command of language structures to address grade appropriate writing tasks with minimal second language acquisition support. Afterward, examine the main features of each level and note how the descriptors further define the summary statements and show the continuum of English language development across the proficiency levels. The top 2 descriptors illustrate the following across the levels. First descriptor, ability to use English to express ideas in writing and engage meaningfully in grade appropriate writing assignments in content area instruction. Second descriptor, Ability to use English to develop or demonstrate elements of grade appropriate writing in English. Focus and coherence. Conventions. Organization. Voice and development of ideas. In order to support EB students in classroom instruction, teachers need to understand the grade appropriate writing expectations for the grade levels they are teaching and the appropriate linguistic supports their students need. Writing and speaking. Writing and speaking. Remember that incorporating appropriate writing and speaking activities in subject matter instruction helps EB students internalize new English vocabulary and language structures. This helps them improve their command of academic English and learn the content taught in their classes. Writing and content areas sample helps student expectations. Narrate, describe, and explain with increasing specificity and detail to fulfill content area writing needs as more English is acquired. In science, this expectation can be addressed through writing assignments in which students, for example, observe, describe, and compare physical properties. Write using newly acquired basic vocabulary and content-based grade-level vocabulary. In math, this expectation can be addressed by having students, for example, write about the shapes they are studying and name items at home that are the same shapes. STAR writing versus TELPAS writing. STAR measures how well students compose, revise, and edit texts as required by the TEKS language arts standards. STAR measures the ability to compose texts with clear, controlling ideas, coherent organization, sufficient development, and appropriate word choice, style, and mechanics. TELPAS measures how well EB students are able to use English to express their ideas in order to learn the writing skills above and the ability to demonstrate their writing proficiency in English. Teachers more familiar with language arts writing standards and English language proficiency writing standards should review this slide and its notes carefully. TELPAS does not measure whether students have attained a particular level of academic writing achievement. STAR measures this. The advanced high level of English language proficiency with a particular STAR written composition score or with passing the STAR writing ELA test should not be compared with an advanced high level in TELPAS. Each assessment is measuring different standards, TEKS and ELPS. In cases where an advanced high EB student is not successful on a language arts writing assessment, teachers and parents know that it is not for reasons associated with an insufficient ability to express ideas or written information in English. Advanced high EB students who do not pass language arts writing tests typically lack the same writing skills as native speakers of English who don't pass. That is, they may have weak English conventions, the writing might not be organized, they may not develop and link their ideas in a clear way, etc. Advanced high EB students who are weak in these areas do not need carefully targeted support in second language acquisition. They need the same type of carefully targeted writing instruction as struggling native English speakers. Introductory resources for special holistic writing assessments. Several resources support introductory training for this domain. Grades 2 through 12 writing collection overview PowerPoint explains how to assemble writing collections that portray the overall English language proficiency of EB students who are eligible for a special holistic administration in writing. Annotated examples of student writing, 6 writing collections representing a variety of grade levels, and English language proficiency levels. Each collection includes detailed rating annotations. TELPAS Educator Guide contains several annotated writing samples for grades 2 through 12. All resources available on TEA's TELPAS resource page. Spring TELPAS online reader training provides in-depth practice. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.